Hello, and welcome to this week's Movie Math, where Dungeons and Dragons, oh man, I really wish this had a 4 in front of it. And up until about an hour or so ago, it did. The trades had it at 40, but it didn't make it. So sad. Instead it rolled whatever an okay roll is in Dungeons and Dragons. Yes, when it comes to brands, Dungeons and Dragons certainly has name recognition these days, thanks to Stranger Things and Critical Role, which have been breakout hits from that kind of space. Dungeons and Dragons is spotlighted on Stranger Things, but Critical Role is a Dungeons and Dragons group. That's what they do. I've never watched them, but I'm certainly aware of them. I'm aware of who's in the group, and I see them trending on social media now and then. So they're pretty big, and they have their own Amazon Prime show. But for the most part, still not a huge brand. Does anybody here play Dungeons and Dragons? We'll have ourselves a little informal poll. So that lack of being a huge brand was just one of many hurdles that this new movie faced, some of its own making. Let us survey. All right, so again, it's launching a brand new brand in the movie marketplace. This is the first Dungeons and Dragons movie. Again, it's been mentioned. Everybody uses the term Mind Flayer and stuff like that, and other Dungeons and Dragons terms, but you don't even always know they're Dungeons and Dragons terms. This is the first Dungeons and Dragons movie. Chris Pine, certainly a household name as well. He's a little bit like Dungeons and Dragons himself, which is funny. But maybe doesn't make him the best person to be cast in this. I mean, he might have gotten paid like a movie star for this new film, but he's never sold movie tickets like a movie star. I mean, he has hits here and there, but he's always a gamble, and he's never been able to sell a movie on his own. Here, you might be like, what about this one? I think Dungeons and Dragons did a lot of the heavy lifting as well as the ensemble cast and the word of mouth. Paramount worked so hard on this, just as hard as Goldstein and Daly did to make it. That was my review, as you might recall. I was like, they didn't need to go this hard, but they did, and it's glorious. And Paramount went just as hard in the ad campaign. They worked so hard. They ran so many previews. They did everything I think they possibly could. It's just, again, they created some hurdles for themselves, and it is it's a new brand to the movie space. All right, so what's another hurdle? Well, Dungeons and Dragons certainly has a diverse cast, but it does suffer from colorism, something I noticed while watching the movie. And moviegoers are becoming more and more not only aware of that, but sensitive to it. Despite Regé-Jean Page and Justice Smith in the cast, and they're both phenomenal in this movie and do fantastic jobs, and they have such cool moments, and they do all these great cool fighting sequences, but Dungeons and Dragons just rolled an 8% for black moviegoers. Ouch! That's a bad number. It's skewed unusually Caucasian. I think if for a movie that really has strong, this is okay. It's not like A Man Called Otto, which I said was as white as mayonnaise or, white sliced bread. But, usually lower 40s or high 30s for the Caucasian audience. You want to see it spread out, And I know there's going to be every time somebody in the comment section is like, that doesn't represent the demographics of America, Grace. We're not talking about America. We're talking about the people who go to the movies. Who goes to the movies? And I'm telling you, consistently, people of color are a huge driving force in the movie business. Why do you think Hollywood's diversifying so much? Hollywood never did anything that didn't make them a buck. And that's why it's so important for moviegoers of color to hold the line if they want to see themselves reflected in the films that they go to see. They could have done better there. 8% is ridiculous for this movie. A really strong, that's a huge note they should take away from the demographics, how they turned out for this film. And it doesn't stop there. While Michelle Rodriguez, Sophia Lillis, and Daisy Head are also fantastic in this movie, clearly Dungeons and Dragons doesn't have a strong female lead. I thought Michelle Rodriguez was strong, but she didn't bring enough women in. And also, they didn't cast an actress with a really strong following on, say, social media. Look at how much Jenna Ortega helped Scream 6. Helped it a lot. And thus, Dungeons & Dragons, coming right after John Wick Chapter 4, was another male-heavy movie. Not as male-heavy as John Wick Chapter 4, which was in the high 60 percentile for guys. But this audience for Dungeons & Dragons was 61% guys. Is that also who's interested in Dungeons & Dragons? Wasn't Chris Pine and Regé-Jean Page supposed to bring in more of the ladies? They cast it to have wide appeal. And it didn't have as wide appeal as maybe they would have hoped, which is interesting. So 61% guys. That's, I think they could have done better there, and would have if they had maybe cast a different actor, at least one other different actress, and maybe written the roles a little. I love this movie so much. I mean, I love it. It's great. Maybe it'll fix itself down the line, which we're going to talk about in a moment. But these are notes that need to be taken away, maybe not by the creatives, but certainly the studio suits, whose job it is to produce hits. That and awards winners, and I don't think Dungeons & Dragons is going to win any awards. Interestingly, it was older men, 25 plus, being the biggest demographic that turned out, which maybe shows that Dungeons & Dragons isn't picking up a lot of new players either. Maybe this movie will change that. I mean, again, I loved the movie so much, but it didn't make me want to play Dungeons & Dragons. I wasn't like, let's play this game. I was like, I hope they make another of these. That was my thought. But if it did get you into Dungeons & Dragons, you would be buying your setup from Hasbro, which is the parent company of Dungeons & Dragons. They have it in its own company, so it seems like it's being published by its own company, but that's actually owned by Hasbro. And they produced this movie, and this was nice for them. This was actually very nice. Their biggest opening since Michael Bay's last Transformers movie back in 2017, which is, again, not only nice, but shows that they're in a bit of a rut. So the question is, though, now, with amazing reviews and amazing audience scores, how long can Dungeons & Dragons lay siege to the box office? I'm having fun with the metaphors, with the lingo. It opened on par with Sony's Uncharted, itself launching a new brand in the movie market space, but with a major assist from studio star Tom Spider-Man Holland. Although Tom Holland has also struggled outside of that franchise, but he certainly is a strong social media star. He's bigger than any star they had in Dungeons & Dragons. And then, of course, Jumanji, which not only had the nostalgia factor going for it, but a very strong diverse cast. That movie was very well made from a business standpoint. And has the numbers to show for it, because while Uncharted only went on to gross $401.7 million worldwide, Jumanji almost made $1 billion. $1 billion! And Jumanji 2 got to $800 million. Where is Jumanji 3? That's what Dwayne Johnson should be making next, right? Go back to Jumanji, man. That works for you. Anyway, Uncharted came out. I'd see another one, although I thought 2 was a little weak. But I think they're fun. Anyway, they certainly set up a third. Anyway, Uncharted came out in mid-February of last year, post-pandemic, and ran smack into the Batman just 2 weeks later. Whereas Jumanji was pre-pandemic, good times, man, and was a Christmas release. If you might recall, that was a special time. It came out opposite The Greatest Showman, and at first both were stuck in the shadow of The Last Jedi. But with Christmas and New Year's back-to-back, Jumanji went up 38% in its second weekend. What a time to be alive. And a very weak January slate for that year, Jumanji and Greatest Showman were huge hits, but not like Jumanji. I mean, Greatest Showman was a great hit for what it was, but Jumanji, wow. By the time 50 Shades Free opened for Valentine's Day in mid-February, Jumanji was already at 365 domestic. Oh, it was beautiful, man. But Dungeons & Dragons does not have an open road like that ahead of it. It doesn't even have a full week. Oh my goodness. We're getting back to a crowded slate, but Jumanji found a spot. You just gotta look for it. And remember, Dungeons & Dragons switched with Scream 6. Maybe they shouldn't have done that, maybe because I think it would have had a little more space. Oh well, shoulda, woulda, coulda. This is what they did. So it doesn't even have a full week. With school holidays now and Easter, this coming, a week from today is Easter, Super Mario Brothers. I'm seeing it tomorrow night. Embargo lifts on Tuesday, right when the, actually there's no Tuesday night showings for Super Mario. You have to either go at midnight or on Wednesday. And then also Air, both open on Wednesday. And both movies are so hotly anticipated that we've got Blue Beetle, Spider-Verse, and Barbie trailers all dropping in the next 2 days. Blue Beetle and Spider-Verse are supposed to be tomorrow, Tuesday, and on Monday, and Barbie on Tuesday, because they want to play with these movies. They're going to be a hot ticket, and they want to have their trailer in front of them. Dungeons & Dragons will also be losing all its premium screens to Super Mario, just as it took them away from John Wick Chapter 4. It's nuts, man. You got to go see these things opening weekend. And John Wick, by the way, opened like a blockbuster, but dropped like a blockbuster this weekend, its second weekend. I think partly because it lost those premium screens. Opening weekend, it did a third of its business on premium screens. But interestingly, Dungeons & Dragons only did a quarter of its business. These just, a quarter versus a third, it makes a difference. But only a quarter of Dungeons & Dragons audience chose to go for the premium experience, so losing those screens might not hurt it as much as it did John Wick Chapter 4. John Wick Chapter 4, though, is still in the top 10 on iTunes with pre-orders. That's incredible. Although also Lionsgate took over iTunes last weekend in a brilliant bit of additional marketing. Paramount, I said they went hard, but they forgot about taking over iTunes. But anyway, I think Dungeons & Dragons will do very well on digital, but it's at 65 with pre-orders. So it's not John Wick Chapter 4. But John Wick took a long time to get there. John Wick Chapter 4 was delivering much smaller numbers up until this latest entry. We'll talk about it a little bit more in a moment. But as for Paramount, Dungeons & Dragons is a Paramount movie. That means it'll go to Paramount Plus eventually when it goes to streaming. Too bad, as I think it would have thrived on Netflix. I think that would have been a great space for this movie. But, because Uncharted did very well on Netflix, and Jumanji, I think, would have as well. Sony doesn't have a streaming service. So after it does its digital purchase rental window, it sends their movies to stream on Netflix, which has worked out quite well for them and their movies. So I don't really know if Paramount Plus is allowing any of those movies to pop. All right, so anyway, maybe Dungeons & Dragons will experience a miracle like Jumanji and Greatest Showman. It does have the audience scores for it, but we'll see. Do you think it deserves to be a hit? Do you want to see a sequel? If you haven't seen it, why not? When are you planning to see it, if ever? Are you spreading the word? What is the word? Look at those scores, man. They're beautiful. As for the rest, although not everything in life is fair. All right, so as for the rest of the top 10, yes, John Wick Chapter 4 suffered a large second weekend drop, but thanks to its boffo opening, it's still far outpacing fellow $100 million picture, that's how much it costs to make them each, Shazam 2. This past weekend, Lionsgate said that considering the amazing opening, maybe they would still make a John Wick Chapter 5. But I think they should stick to their guns and keep it at 4, especially with the way they ended it, and especially with this big drop. Let Stahelski and Reeves do something else. I don't make them, especially Stahelski, don't make that man make John Wick movies for the rest of his life. Let him spread his goodness to some franchises who desperately need it. What do you want to see happen? Do you want to see John Wick Chapter 5, or do you want to see Stahelski and Reeves go on to do other things? I don't know if they're still going to make that Constantine movie. Let's see. And yet another faith-based film made a big splash in theaters. Wow, written and directed by former U.S. Marine David Helling, and it took him 5 years to do it. What a PR story. And sure enough, the movie was crowdfunded. Hollywood used to make a lot of Bible picks back in the day. Well, they continue to let independent filmmakers dominate this space. But could Hollywood even get back into it, considering how politicized that space has become? And despite Jonathan Majors recently being arrested and charged, and those texts were bad, and his own team released them. Whew. But Creed 3 is not only holding strong at the box office still, but it's number 2 over on digital where it just dropped. So Jonathan Majors might not be driving business for that anymore, but at least nobody can say he's hurting it. Whew! We'll see what happens to him. I think, obviously the jury of public opinion is still out, and then we'll see what a real judge, and I don't know if they would have a jury in that kind of a case, but we'll see what happens, although I think the longer this takes, the worse it is, because the news cycle will just move on. Great news for Michael B. Jordan, though, who again made his directorial debut here. That's great for him. I love Michael B. Jordan. I think this is very exciting for his career. Scream 6 is about to cross that century mark, right? And next weekend it will for sure. It's right there. And 1001, this is going to be interesting, made a nice debut as a potential awards flick, and it has very strong reviews as well. This is phenomenal for writer-director A.V. Rockwell, not only getting her a good start to her awards campaign, but maybe for some franchise to pick her up. Franchises are always looking for this awards-based talent in front of and behind the camera because they have a good track record, critics like them, and since they are making small independent movies, they are cheap. That's why they go for this talent these days, although they're getting mixed results, but sometimes it works out really well. So this is great for A.V. Rockwell. And also for singer-turned-actress Teyana Taylor, a long way from her cameo in Coming to America in her first serious role. Both could be strong awards contenders next year, as I said, but Taylor may be following in the footsteps. I see a campaign here taking shape. Halle Berry and Monique won Oscars for similar low-budget films, and there's, of course, also fellow singer-turned-actress Andra Day, who didn't get the Oscar but did get the Golden Globe. Where is Andra Day? It's tough business, tough business. But anyway, those women set a precedent for a very good, successful campaign and maybe win for Teyana Taylor. And Universal's Focus Features, one of the strongest awards houses in the business, along with Searchlight, Plan B, and A24, they are very plugged in. They know how to campaign. I think they're in a very good position to help Rockwell and Taylor. Now let's head over to streaming, where for the first week of March, it was double Pedro Pascal, as The Last of Us continues to post strong numbers while The Mandalorian came online with Nielsen's charts. On the overall chart, The Last of Us is still in third place with, yet again, only a fraction of its audience, because we're just looking at the HBO Max portion here, while all 17 episodes of Mando, season 1 and 2, plus the season 3 premiere, put it at number 5. Remember, Nielsen doesn't divide them by season. It counts all seasons and all episodes as one. On the originals chart, that helped Mando get to number 3, much better than Andor and Obi-Wan ever did, but they didn't have past seasons to back them up with viewing numbers again. But still, it was it's nice to see Star Wars and Disney Plus a little higher here. So we'll see if they can grow. Although, considering the lack of conversation about Mandalorian Season 3, I don't know if that's going to happen. But Paramount Plus is finally on Nielsen too, and you can see them here with the Yellowstone spinoff 1923, which just had its season finale the week that this chart was for this chart, because, you know, Nielsen's a couple of weeks behind, and it placed at number 6, so that's excellent. Over on Acquired, The Last of Us rose to number 1. It's at the top of Acquired. That's fantastic. With 1 week to go on its run. And then, of course, we'll see what happens with people who are binging. But this is very impressive and a huge win for HBO Max on these charts. It shows the strength of their slate, and I also think it shows maybe they're transitioning a larger chunk of their audience from HBO to HBO Max. And then on the movies chart, Netflix's We Have a Ghost, which premiered the weekend right before this chart, is number 1. Not too exciting in the movies chart this week. As for Netflix's charts for just this previous week, Luther is still the number 1 movie. Come on, Idris Elba's agent. Can't you spin this into something? Here is some capital to spend. I would think at the very least he could get Idris Elba a new Netflix series. He or she, whoever represents Elba, Elba should get a new Netflix series off of this. Come on. Animated movie The Magician's Elephant rose a spot from last week, but its numbers overall are weak. And then 2019's I See You, starring Oscar winner Helen Hunt. As I told you, it is a tough business. And this movie tanked in its original theatrical and digital release. It was just the right kind of, how did I never see this movie before, gem for Netflix. This happens all the time with them. There'll be like a tiny little movie that no one remembers or never saw with like some big talent in it. I think U.S. Marshals with Tommy Lee Jones and Robert Downey Jr. was one from a couple of months ago that everybody's like, oh yeah, I'll watch this. By the way, for St. Patrick's Day, one of you in the stream recommended that I watch The Fugitive because it has one of the sequences takes place during the St. Patrick's Day parade. I didn't remember that movie at all. It was a great rewatch. So I see the appeal. I see the appeal. As for series, here comes The Night Agent. Talk about A Star is Born. Here's another interesting conversation for you. This was a surprise hit, a huge surprise hit for Netflix, and they've already renewed it for a season 2. Let's see which movie franchise gets to star Gabriel Basso first. I don't even know how to pronounce his name. He's still fresh and new. But is he? He's in fact been working in Hollywood for a very long time. He was back in that Kings of Summer movie. Remember that was an awards contender, right? That gave Nick Robinson a big boost, although he didn't really take off, but it gave him his shot. And then also, The Boys' Erin Moriarty got her big break here and got The Boys from this movie. But not Basso. Poor Basso. But here, finally, he got his big break years later. It's tough. Hollywood's a tough, unpredictable business. And then Shadow and Bone Season 2 was kept at number 2 for the second week in a row because of The Night Agent. It came in much stronger and is a much less expensive show than Shadow and Bone. They spent so much money on Shadow and Bone. The VFX and the sets and everything, the costumes are phenomenal. But I finished it, I thought it was only medium. I mean, they ended on a big cliffhanger, but I gotta tell you, I wouldn't do Season 3. I'm like, and I know the show is expensive. But you know what? The talent on this show is so incredible and so likable and so fantastic. I'd be like, here is a treasure trove of talent for you guys to mine from other franchises and streaming services. I mean, Daisy Heads in Dungeons & Dragons, she's phenomenal in that movie. But yeah, a lot of great talent here. A lot of great talent. The casting director on Shadow and Bone did a phenomenal job. Then on iTunes, Avatar 2, number 1, with Creed 3 again, which just dropped right behind it. And A Man Called Otto and Puss in Boots are both still in the top 10. What runs? What runs? As for this coming week, busy. Wow, in theaters, as I said, Wednesday, Super Mario Bros. And Air both drop. Well, on Friday, there's Owen Wilson's Paint, which seems like a streaming movie to me. Let's see if anyone goes to see that in theaters. As for streaming movies, Prime Video has Dennis Quaid starring On a Wing and a Prayer on Wednesday. That looks like a streaming movie too. Owen Wilson's like, look at that one. And I'm like, all right, that's even more of a streaming movie, Owen. While on Friday, Netflix has Chupa, right? Twitter has been having a field day with this title. But in all seriousness, it is produced by Chris Columbus, stars Demian Bashir and Christian Slater, and is directed by Alfonso Cuarón's son, Jonas. Maybe worth a look. And Chloe Bailey, sister of Halle Bailey, stars in Praise This for Peacock. That's a movie. For digital sales and rentals on Tuesday, that's on iTunes and the like, wherever digital movies are sold and rented, Ireland's Oscar-nominated The Quiet Girl was up for Best International Feature, and documentary Living with Chucky debut. Shows? On Wednesday, Schmigadoon inexplicably returns on Apple TV+. I kid, but as someone who's not such a big fan of musical theater, especially like that kind of musical theater. I mean, I saw Camelot on Friday at Lincoln Center, and I really enjoyed it. So I like some musical theater. I guess I just, again, as I said, I don't like that musical theater. But anyway, Schmigadoon is back. Schmigadoon. Any Schmigadoon fans? And then you can defend it in the comments down below. Well, crime drama, The Good Mothers, this looks interesting, debuts on Hulu. Loved Bad Sisters over on Apple TV, so it makes me feel like maybe I should check that out. Thursday, we've got that Grease spinoff on Paramount Plus, and then here's the big one, Beef on Netflix. Woo! This is the one where director Jake Schreier, writer and creator Lee Sung-jin, they just brought him in to replace the former writer. They were like, woo, this screenplay just needs a new writer. I wish Marvel would do that on a number of their projects, and they are. They're starting to do that. They did it for Fantastic Four, too, this past week. And then, of course, star Steven Yeun are all handling MCU's Thunderbolts. What about Ali Wong, man? Bring her in. Come on, give her something. She's gotta have a cameo. That would just be mean. Then on Friday, Hulu also debuts Tiny Beautiful Things starring Catherine Hahn. Here she is. Here's your holdover until Agatha comes out next. So far from now. Well, Netflix has Transatlantic, where you'll notice some familiar faces. Or maybe, not as familiar as you might think. That's Gillian Jacobs there in the middle. Depicting the French resistance working to save artists in World War II. And that's this week's Movie Math. What have you been watching? What do you plan to watch? What do you think of Dungeons & Dragons? Do you think it has what it takes to become a franchise, aka get a second movie? And again, would you make that fifth John Wick? Or would you let Stahelski be free? Share your thoughts down below, subscribe today, and of course, as always, you can check out some more videos right now.